Hello, my name is Russ Timpson. I'm the founder of the Tall Building Fire Safety Network. What you're about to see is a video from our 2025 Tall Building Fire Safety Conference. You can find more other great videos on tall building fire safety on our YouTube channel, and there are many more presentations on our website, www.tallbuildingfiresafety. If you find our videos and presentations useful, please like and subscribe us on our YouTube channel. Halfway through the video, you're going to see details of our 2026 conference, which will take place in May in London. We have a fantastic program, and we also have a separate high-rise firefighting masterclass with Brent Brooks and special guests from around the world. There are also details of our 5-day intensive tall building fire safety management course, which will be running in London throughout 2026, but also in the Mediterranean, in Cyprus and in Malta. This is an ideal course for anybody who's dealing with fire safety matters in tall and complex buildings. So I hope you find these videos useful. And as we say in the Tall Building Fire Safety Network, go high and go well. Thanks.
I followed those two very digital presentations. This is very analog.
Well, I mean, you've mentioned the golden thread, but I think just probably.
With the new Building Safety Act and guidance documents being updated, more modern buildings are going to be designed and equipped in a very, very different way to our existing building stock. The issue with regards to people that live in that residential building stock, particularly people who've got mobility related issues, isn't going to go away just because we've hopefully improved fire safety within newer buildings. So I posed a question to some close friends who I trusted who wouldn't ridicule me for my question, Russ being one of them, and I didn't really get any significant reason, well, not ones that I wasn't aware of anyway, as to why we shouldn't be able to do what I'm just about to talk about. I then subsequently posted something on LinkedIn, so I exposed myself to the fire safety community, which made me feel a bit uncomfortable. But again, I didn't really get an awful lot of resistance. I'm expecting a slightly different reaction today, which is fine. But anyway, I'm just going to talk you through my thoughts. So that's the question. And some of you, I'm sure, particularly those of you with a fire safety background, and even in the video or the presentation we've just had, it was quite apt, really, that several times on the video that was being shown on the screen, the comment about do not use the lifts in the event of a fire came up several times. And that's what we've told people throughout history, I guess. If there's a fire, don't use the lifts. There's even labels on the lift saying, in the event of fire, don't use the lift. And I'm posing this question, basically, is could we consider, I'm not saying definitely do, I'm just saying could we consider using them in some circumstances? And I guess fundamentally for me is we've got this thing in a building which is really, really useful, either in or not in a fire, and we've chosen as a blanket statement to say, irrespective of any thoughts really, don't use it in the event of a fire, okay? So that's the question I'm posing. I was in the fire service for 26 years, both as an operational firefighter and a regulator, and I've been a fire engineer commercially for about 6 years now, I suppose. So I don't think my mindset has changed at all. So I'm still very, very focused on people and making buildings safe for them to live in and to visit. So I don't believe personally that my opinion has changed at all in that respect. So I'm not posing this question lightly. I'm doing it because I think we should be more considerate, I guess, about people that live in buildings when they catch fire and they can't use the staircases. Okay? So Why do we have lifts in, it's not, well, it might be a stupid question, I don't know, but why do we have lifts in residential buildings, particularly tall ones? It's not rhetorical. I would like someone to talk to me. Ease of access, yeah. So if, particularly in tall residential buildings, if you didn't have a lift and you had to use the stairs, A, you're excluding loads of people from that building. B, no one's going to want to rent or live in it because it'd just be a complete pain to have to be able to get to and from your flat. So yes, that's a good. So we put these things in buildings, don't we? Lifts. And up until very, very recently, any lift that's in a residential building is a standard passenger lift. For those of you that don't know, the primary differences between an evacuation lift and a passenger lift is a dedicated evacuation lift will have two power supplies. So if one falls over, the other one will kick in. So it's more robust in terms of a power supply. It's better protected, so it would have a lobby outside of it. So in lots and lots of residential buildings, the lifts open directly into a corridor where all the flats are. If it's an evacuation lift, it has to have a lobby, so it's better protected. And it will have controls within it to enable the lift to be used in an evacuation situation. And that could be set up in a lot of different ways. So in particular, not exclusively, because I guess if you lived maybe on the ground, or, on the first or second floor, you might, or possibly if you were into fitness, maybe you'd use the staircases more often as part of that. But generally speaking, I would suggest if someone lives above the second floor, they're going to use a lift. They could be the fittest person in the world, but if they live on the 12th floor, chances are they're going to use a lift to go in and out of the building every single day, okay? And as it was mentioned earlier, I think it was Nick and Chris about, some people may not even know they'll know there's a staircase in the building or be aware of it, but they've probably never ever actually gone up or down it. So what are the consequences for people that live in these buildings that have mobility related issues in the event of a fire if we're telling them not to use a lift? So they can't use the stairs because they're not physically capable of doing that, and we're telling them not to use a lift. So what are they supposed to do? And to frame the question, I suppose, to give us some idea of the magnitude, if you like, how many people do we think in the UK are registered as having a disability-ish? As a percentage, what do we think? Take a stab. 30%? Any advance or lessening of 30%? 10? Okay, it's somewhere in the middle, okay? So according to the Office of National Statistics, as of 2021, which is the last data I could get, 18% of the UK population have some form of disability, okay? Now that could be physical, could be cognitive, could be due to anxiety, and I'm sure we've all seen in the press, I guess, that since 2021, maybe that number's gone up, but if we say it's around about 18%, okay, of the UK population have some form of disability registered. And according to family research data that was published in 22-23, of that 18% of people that have disabilities, how many of them do we think have got a mobility-related element to that? Half's not a bad stab, so 41% apparently. So if we said that 41% of 18% is around about 10, just to keep it nice and round. So in the UK, as a population, about 10% of the population have a mobility-related disability. Okay, now that could be quite extreme, might not be too bad, but it's enough for them to be registered as having a mobility-related disability. So on top of that, what other sorts of people do we think might be living in tall residential buildings who would struggle to use a staircase in the event of an emergency? Children? Yep, so perhaps a parent who's got 1, 2, 3 or multiple children under a certain age. So if you've got a toddler and maybe a babe in arms, I would suggest you'd probably, you'd find it quite difficult to negotiate a staircase on your own. We could have someone who broke their leg skiing or playing rugby. We could have someone who, through the natural ageing process, so they're not registered as disabled, but they might just through the natural ageing process could have a problem with their knee, maybe just had it replaced, so they've got some post-operative issues. So there's lots of people who could be living in tall residential buildings that are not able to use the staircase either at all or easily, particularly over multiple flights of stairs, okay? If I say anything you disagree with, please, I know we're going to do questions afterwards, but I think it'd be better if I say something you fundamentally disagree with, I'd rather you did it now, and I'd address that now rather than me sort of continuing on. So I'm assuming, thus far, I haven't. So we've discussed that. So, in tall residential buildings, I'm sure most of you do know this, but just to help to frame the conversation as well, we have this thing called a stay-put policy, which I detest as a term, but there you go, or a defend-in-place policy, or delayed evacuation, however you choose to describe it. But basically, the concept is, if the fire's not in your flat, then it's safe for you to remain in the building, okay? So we're all comfortable with that as a term. We may not be comfortable with it as a strategy, but as a term, okay? So, if there's a fire in a flat, there's a fire alarm system in the flat which would go off and notify the people in the flat that there's a problem, and hopefully they'll respond to it quite quickly, leave the flat, and the front door of the flat will shut, and the fire and the products of combustion will stay in the flat, smoke. In terms of the lift, what happens to the lift? So if there's a fire in a flat and the building's been designed or remediated to a point where it's doing the job that we would like it to do, so it's performing as its function as designed, and it's not misbehaving, the fire and the smoke will stay in the flat, okay? What's happening to the lift, the passenger lift in the building? Nothing, okay. Well, I say nothing, it's continuing to perform its function that it was designed for, to allow people to come in and go out of the building. So it's carrying on regardless, as is everyone else in the building because there's no alarm, okay? So when will the lift stop working? Possibly. What about but will the building itself tell the lift ever to stop working? In the flats, there's a Part 6 system, okay. So, but what about outside the flat? Possibly. Yes. Okay. So maybe. So more modern buildings will probably be designed with detection in the common areas, so like the corridors, the lobbies, and the staircases, and that detection should be linked to what we call third-party devices. Okay. And third-party devices could be a simple hold-open device on a door. So if the detection, there's no alarm, so I'm calling it a fire detection system because that's what it is. If a detector detects smoke, then it would tell the magnets on the doors to release, and the fire doors will shut. It could also tell a smoke control system to work, and hopefully, or not, as the case may be, to be discussed, it will tell the lift to stop behaving like a lift and to go to the ground floor, doors to open and go out of service. And within the lift, there should be a sign to say it's in fire mode, so no one thinks that the lift's malfunctioning. So to give you an idea of that, so we have a fire in a flat, and as we've just discussed, hopefully the Part 6 fire alarm system in the flat will go off, and fire gets a bit bigger, produces more smoke, and the people, as long as everything goes as according to plan, the individuals in the flat will leave the flat front door shuts, and no one's any the wiser. That's assuming someone was in the flat when the fire started. So at this point, the passenger lift is still functioning, completely as normal, okay? Or I should say, in older buildings, the passenger lift probably isn't even if there is a detection system in the common areas, which you don't need in a residential block of flats if you don't have any third-party devices to activate. But I've worked with a number of local authorities, and a lot of their lifts in their older buildings aren't linked to the fire detection system anyway, so they'll just continue to function as normal. Not until that point, assuming there is some detection in a corridor, at that point, hopefully a detector would detect smoke, and then the lift would react accordingly, and it will do what it was told to do, assuming it's been programmed to do that. We've got a door in the middle, so it keeps the two staircases separate, and then we get, obviously because something's gone wrong with our door, and you get loads more smoke in there. And as you can see, because there's no lobby by the lift, that lift's out of the game. No one's getting anywhere near that staircase either. Okay. So that's basically how a passenger lift is designed to function, or not, as the case may be in a residential building. So, what if we did this? Okay. So what I've done by adding those doors in is I've created a lobby outside the lift. Now, bearing in mind also, we've got no refuges in residential buildings because we just never, well, wrongly, clearly, but we never put refuges in residential buildings because there aren't any members of staff, and it was deemed that because of the stay put policy, it wasn't necessary, which is actually written down in guidance. And therefore, if our door to our flat fails, at least we've got the smoke contained within another protected area. So we've got 2 layers of protection between the flat and the bit we're trying to protect. And then our lobbies start to look like a bit more of a protected area, and dare I say it, you could potentially even class it as a refuge, maybe. Okay? So we have a scenario then. So I've explained how buildings are designed to work over time. So we've got this thing called a stay put policy. We've got a blanket policy of telling people not to use lifts unless it's an evacuation lift in the event of a fire. We know we've got a number of people that can't use the stairs, and in loads of residential buildings there is nowhere for them to go once they've left their flat. So imagine, if you will, a scenario where we have a fire in a flat, the individual has a mobility-related issue of some description, everything works as planned, so they leave the flat because their fire alarm system in their flat told them to do so, and the door to the flat shuts. They leave the flat and go towards the staircase because that's the only place they've got to go, really, rather than just standing in a corridor. There's a sign on the lift saying, "Do not use in the event of a fire." There's no alarm going off. They've used their mobile phone maybe to call the fire alarm system service, and they go and stand by the lift and staircase, waiting for someone to help them. Okay. Meanwhile, whilst they stood there waiting for someone to help them, bing, lift doors open. Out comes one of their neighbours. "Oh, what are you doing here?" "Oh, my flat's on fire." "Oh. Okay, so we've got the perverse situation of the person who might actually need the lift to evacuate from the block of flats has been told not to, but everyone else who's coming back from work, just picked the kids up from school, is carrying on using this lift because no smoke's in the corridor, so the lift will carry on working anyway. Do we think that's a reasonable thing? Do we think that's an appropriate way to address the issue of people who might not be able to use a staircase when we've got a perfectly functioning lift within the building? So some of the downsides of it, okay. What's the likelihood of a fire in a flat having an impact on the power supply of a lift? Negligible. I would suggest 0, personally. So the power supply, sharp intake of breath. The power supplies and the lift motor room are either within the lift shaft, which is a protected shaft, or they're in a space directly adjacent to the lift, which is also a protected space, a compartment, okay? Obviously, all of this is based upon the assumption that the building has been built properly, maintained properly, has been remediated properly, and is functioning as it's designed and it's not misbehaving. The other downside, the lift isn't working. Okay, so the lift's broken down, and I've spoken to my colleagues in the local authorities about their failure rate of their lifts. Some of them are appalling, to be frank, and they break down quite regularly. But how's that any worse? So the individual goes to the lift and it's not working. Are they in any worse situation than they're in today if they were firing their flat? What I'm suggesting is if the lift isn't working or it's defective, it's no different to telling them not to use it, okay? It's no worse. So we've got someone outside their flat, they know their flat's on fire, they're probably emotionally charged by that fact because they know that there is a fire in there. They're probably the only person in this 20-storey building with, I don't know, 200 flats in, who actually knows that there is a fire in the building. Unless they've called the fire service, they would be the only people, they would have a unique piece of information. This building is experiencing a fire, but no one else does. They could bang on a neighbour's door and ask them, you know, can I come into your flat? And hope that someone's in, or that they would be willing to, or be willing to answer the door. But unless any smoke's gone into the corridor, that lift will continue to function. Even in the modern building, even in the most modern building that has got a fire detection system in the common areas that is linked to the lift, it will continue to function unless smoke gets into the corridor. So we've got a fully functioning passenger lift that we're telling this person not to use, even though everyone else in the building is still using it. Yes?
These even risks, because the first one, if it's defective, you'd be no worse off than you were if you told people not to use it. And the other two, if you're in it, it's going to go to ground anyway, so you get what you want.
Yeah, I'm trying to pose some risks that people might have thought of themselves so we could discuss them. But I'm sure you've got some others, but so say, for instance, that the person has left their flat, they can't use the stairs, and they decide, stuff this, I don't care what anyone said, the only way I'm getting out of this building safely is by using the lift, push the button, and the lift arrives, and the doors open, they get in the lift, and in the process of doing that, so they've actually managed to get into the car, the seals on the door fail or something else allows some smoke to come out into the corridor. What is actually going to happen, as our colleague has just said? The doors will shut on the lift car, the lift will go to the ground floor, which is where the individual wants to go. It could be another floor, but almost without exception, it's the ground floor. And the doors will open, and then that individual is now in a place of safety or relative safety and can leave the lift car and do whatever it is they care to do. Leave the building, stay in the foyer, whatever. So what I'm asking you, okay, because I think I'm either mental, which is quite possible, or I'm definitely going out on a limb here because I can see some quizzical and, quite frankly, horrified faces about what I'm saying. But I can't understand and I can't find a significant flaw in what I'm saying. And not all of you, but most of you are fire professionals. And I want you to come up with a reason why we should continue to not use perfectly functional passenger lifts, standard passenger lifts in residential buildings in some circumstances. Now, clearly you need, I'm not just saying go back, for those of you that have building stock to go back and start doing, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is, I don't think we should be saying, there's no circumstances where you should be using a passenger lift. If we understand in reality what is going to be happening anyway. The thing is going to carry on working. Yes?
So I think we have to go back to actually, I totally agree with what you're saying, but we have to go back to the reason why we tell people not to use the lift, and that is people in other parts of the building, when they see a fire in the building, they go in the lift and there's a risk of going to the fire floor. So,
yes.
So what you're saying is perfectly correct, and the person that's involved in the fire has got the most information, and they're 100% why can't they use the lift? But we have to go back to the ethos that we tell everybody not to because of that small risk that someone ends up on the fire floor.
Okay, so but I'm not disagreeing with you, but my response to that would be it's no less likely. So we've got, say this individual is sat on the fire floor and the door does fail, whilst someone is in a lift that's, you know, they're literally, the doors are just about to open up actually into the fire. We allow that to happen, don't we? We allow the lift to carry on working up until the point smoke gets into the corridor. So I think that risk, I mean, you'd have to be quite unlucky when you to actually be arriving at the fire floor at the same time as the door failed. So I think that's a very, very small risk. But I think there's a far greater risk for me, both emotionally and someone perhaps attempting to do something which they're either physically not capable of or definitely don't want to do because they know that their flat's on fire. When there's a fully functioning passenger lift, which is either working or not, it doesn't matter. If it's working, push the button, open the lift, get in it. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen to that individual? Yes?
I think it solves a series of other confusion points as well around, you know, the disabled refuge intercom system, you know, because the disabled refuge is remote from the lift, and so, you know, then, you know, that intercom, where does it go, who's going to, and what are they going to do when they answer that call anyway, and also, you know, with evacuation lifts and the intercom system that they have, which is then a separate system again,
Yeah.
and no one's really super clear on how that's meant to work as well, because if you can talk in it, then you're obviously not in the refuge where you're told to be.
Well, who are you going to? And in most residential buildings, if you were lucky enough to have a refuge and an emergency voice communication system, who would you be talking to anyway? You know, but it doesn't really get away from the fact that they're still stuck on the floor, and like I say, if I have experienced fires in my own, I'm embarrassed to say, in my own home, but anyway, I did. You know, it is quite a frightening. It was before I joined the fire service, I hasten to add, and it wasn't what made me want to join the fire service. But anyway, it is a frightening experience to wake up to your you know, the room you're in or the flat you're in being on fire. It's a frightening thing, and once you get out of the flat, human nature being what it is, you'll want to leave the building. Okay, you want to get as far away from that thing as you possibly can. And we have a minimum of 10% of the people in this country who probably can't do that without some assistance. No refuge, no evacuation devices in residential buildings, no one to use them even if there were. And we've got a fully functioning passenger lift. Why can't we use it?
I think I would definitely consider doing it, but on very sort of narrow circumstances. So you couldn't have it where there's a simultaneous evacuation. I know you said
No.
it's not in that scenario. I think you'd want to survey your building to make sure compartmentation is sound. I think you would want to prioritise people with wheelchairs so that those pesky able-bodied people didn't just take the lift because it was there. But yeah, I would consider it for people with mobility.
Yeah. Well, bearing in mind, and thank you for that, I appreciate that. Bearing in mind, because of the way that the buildings are designed, I mean, you know, clearly, if something would happen at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the lift is probably, or lifts are probably quite busy because people are maybe coming back from work, bringing their kids back from school, whatever. 2 o'clock in the morning, if you push the button, I'd hazard a guess that the lift would arrive quite quickly. So, you know, there's those different types of scenarios. Dare I say it, I am going to say it because I am going to dare, you could program your common fire detection system to tell the lift to go to the fire floor. What I'm saying is I don't think we should continue with a blanket statement of not using lifts in a fire. I think we should be taking a more measured, balanced approach, understanding how buildings are designed, how smoke detection systems are designed to function and how they talk to the passenger lift, understand the risk of a fire in a flat having any impact whatsoever on the power supplies to a passenger lift, and equally the likelihood of, well, your your risk-benefit analysis of this poor person who can't use the stairs and are being told not to use the only thing, which in effect is the only way that they're going to get out of that building unless someone's going to help, some other person or numbers of people probably are physically going to help them. As I said, right at the outset, the question was, can we use standard passenger lifts to evacuate residential buildings? That was the question. I don't have all the answers, but what I do feel very, very strongly about is that we shouldn't be saying to people, don't use lifts. Not in other buildings, so this is specifically bespoke, a personal opinion about residential buildings. I don't think we should be making a blanket statement not to use them, because they're going to be functioning and used by everyone else. So why wouldn't we let the person who actually needs it use it when everyone else is still using it? Yes.
In the UK, I think we've agreed that we tend to stick to somewhat archaic prescriptive guidelines, and we only ever change when disaster happens. And most of the legislation is written after disasters happen, and we go, oh, we need to change now. So if we've got a statement policy or whatever in the UK, wherever we want to go to, what do they do in other countries where Europe evacuates?
Yeah.
So what do other countries around the world do with lifts, and does that work? Do we know?
Can we tackle this?
Yeah. So I'm mindful. So I'm just going to wrap this up. As I say, the point of me doing this really was to challenge currently held beliefs, if you like, around the safety or otherwise of using normal passenger lifts in residential buildings. And if I've done that and just made you think about it, then I've achieved my goal, basically.